In a dimly lit downtown bar called the Copper Mule, the clink of glasses and murmurs of conversation set a familiar rhythm on a Friday evening. The bar was known for its eclectic patrons and a lively atmosphere that made it a favorite haunt for locals after work. But on this night, an incident unfolded that would shatter the normal flow of events and spark a dramatic turning point. Behind the long, polished bar, Tony T.J. Johnson, a bartender with a well-practiced smile and a swagger that masked his narrow-minded views, was busy serving drinks. His uniform, crisp and stained with a few remnants of the night's festivities, was his armor, and his attitude his weapon. Tonight, his eyes narrowed as he spotted a well-dressed black man who had just taken a seat at the far end of the bar. Without any preamble, TJ leaned forward and, loud enough for nearby patrons to hear, sneered, "I don't serve your kind here," his voice dripping with disdain. The words sliced through the ambient chatter like a dagger. The man, who had been calmly perusing the cocktail menu, looked up with wide, astonished eyes. Before he could muster a reply, TJ added, "You think you can waltz in here and act all high and mighty? Not on my watch." The tension in the room thickened instantly. Conversations halted, glasses froze mid-clink. Some patrons gasped. Others pulled out their phones to capture the unfolding drama. The man, whose name was Marcus Washington, maintained his composure. His eyes revealed only quiet incredulity. His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with TJ's aggressive posture, creating a scene that was as shocking as it was unexpected. Then, just as the humiliation seemed set to linger, a single phone call rang out, clear, deliberate, and full of quiet authority. The sound cut through the stunned silence like a clarion call. In that charged moment, every eye in the bar fixed on the source of the call, and a ripple of anticipation spread among the onlookers. What had begun as a blatant act of racism was now on the verge of an extraordinary reversal. Questions multiplied in hushed tones. Who was on the other end of that phone? What secret power did that voice command? Unbeknownst to TJ, the events about to unfold would not only expose the depth of his prejudice, but would also bring to light a truth that would upend his world. In that fleeting instant, as the echoes of the bartender's hateful words mingled with the resonant ring of the phone, fate had set in motion a chain of events that promised to deliver swift, unexpected karma. The stage was set for a dramatic reversal, one that would leave TJ reeling and force every witness to confront the reality that sometimes one moment of truth can shatter a lifetime of bigotry. Before we go any further, subscribe to the channel and comment below where you're watching from. For our returning subscribers, thank you so much for your unwavering support. It truly means a lot to our community. The Copper Mule was more than just a bar. It was a microcosm of downtown life. Located on a bustling street in the heart of the city, the venue featured exposed brick walls, warm amber lighting, and vintage decor that gave it a timeless charm. Its long, polished bar counter was a magnet for after-work crowds, and its walls, adorned with local art and memorabilia, told stories of the neighborhood's vibrant past. At the center of tonight's controversy was Tony T.J. Johnson, a bartender in his early 40s known among regulars for his sharp tongue and an attitude that left little room for dissent. TJ prided himself on his ability to enforce his own version of order behind the bar, believing that his style, brash, unapologetic, and sometimes cruel, was what kept the Copper Mule running smoothly. His uniform was immaculate, his movements practiced, and his eyes, though dark and unfriendly, belied a man who had long allowed his personal biases to dictate his behavior. Opposite him sat Marcus Washington, a man whose presence exuded quiet strength and understated dignity. In his mid-30s, Marcus was impeccably dressed in a tailored blazer and crisp shirt, a sharp contrast to the casual, rough-around-the-edges style of many patrons. Known for his calm demeanor and respectful nature, Marcus had earned a reputation as someone who navigated life's challenges with grace. A successful entrepreneur in the local tech scene and an active community volunteer, Marcus was widely respected in his neighborhood. His gentle smile and steady gaze told a story of perseverance and hard-won achievements. The setting of the Copper Mule, with its low-lit ambience and lively chatter, had always been a place where people from different walks of life could come together. On any given night, the bar would be filled with students, artists, professionals, and longtime locals, all sharing stories over drinks. It was an environment meant to celebrate diversity and community spirit. Yet tonight, that spirit was marred by the cruel actions of one individual who chose to let his prejudices override the very values the community held dear. As the incident unfolded, regulars at the bar exchanged uneasy glances. Some recalled past instances when TJ's harsh words had stung, though none had anticipated the level of vitriol he would display tonight. In contrast, Marcus's calm, measured reaction became a beacon of hope, a silent assertion that dignity could withstand even the most brazen acts of discrimination. The background of the bar itself added layers to the unfolding drama. The rustic decor, soft jazz playing in the background, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee created an atmosphere that was at once comforting and sophisticated. It was in this setting, designed to be a haven for community and connection, that the stark reality of prejudice was laid bare. Every detail, from the warm glow of the overhead lights to the subtle hum of conversation, served as a reminder that the values of respect and inclusion were integral to the identity of the place. Yet, in that moment, they stood in direct opposition to the hateful outburst of one bartender. In a space meant for celebration and camaraderie, the clash between TJ's narrow-minded aggression and Marcus's quiet resilience set the stage for a dramatic confrontation that would soon have repercussions far beyond the walls of the Copper Mule. Unbeknownst to TJ, the choices he made that night would not only tarnish his reputation, but would also trigger a series of events that would force him to reckon with the true meaning of karma. In the seconds following TJ's venomous words and the physical act of punching, the atmosphere in the Copper Mule turned electric with tension. A collective gasp swept through the room as patrons tried to process what they had just witnessed. Some immediately reached for their phones, capturing the shocking scene from multiple angles. The raw footage, with its close-ups of Marcus's stunned expression and TJ's aggressive sneer, quickly began circulating on social media, igniting a firestorm of public outrage. Amid the chaos, Marcus Washington remained a study in composure. Despite the shock and pain, his eyes shone with determination and quiet dignity. He calmly explained to a nearby patron, in a voice that was both soft and unwavering, that he had come to the bar simply for a drink, nothing more. His measured tone stood in stark contrast to TJ's explosive outburst, and it soon became clear that this was not merely a case of one bad day, but rather an act of discrimination fueled by deep-seated prejudice. Inside the bar, whispers spread rapidly among both staff and customers. Regulars recalled that TJ had a reputation for cutting remarks and a harsh attitude, but few had ever witnessed him resort to physical violence. "I've seen him talk trash before," one longtime customer muttered, "but this is different." His words were echoed by others who expressed disbelief that someone in a service position could behave so callously. As the internal murmurs grew louder, the management of the Copper Mule was forced to intervene. The head bartender, who had long admired TJ's flair but was increasingly troubled by his behavior, quickly escorted him to the back of the bar for a quiet word. Meanwhile, the owner of the establishment, Ms. Linda Garcia, a woman known for her commitment to creating a welcoming and inclusive space, stepped forward to address the situation publicly. With a calm but firm tone, she assured the stunned crowd that the matter would be dealt with swiftly and that no act of discrimination would be tolerated under her watch. Yet, even as Linda promised accountability, the incident continued to escalate. Digital evidence soon revealed that this was not the first time TJ had targeted a patron based on race. A series of old video clips and complaints began to surface on social media, painting a damning picture of a bartender whose actions were not isolated but part of a broader pattern of bias. The revelations intensified the outrage of the community, and calls for an internal review grew louder by the hour. As tension mounted, a respected local journalist arrived at the bar to cover the story. The journalist interviewed several witnesses, including employees who had observed TJ's behavior on previous occasions. He always had a chip on his shoulder when it came to certain customers, one staff member confided. But I never thought he would actually resort to violence. The journalist's report, emphasizing the systemic nature of the problem, soon appeared on several local news outlets, further amplifying the public's demand for justice. Meanwhile, Marcus, though still recovering from the initial shock, began to receive support from fellow patrons. Many offered words of encouragement and solidarity, praising his composure and dignity under pressure. One sympathetic customer remarked, "He handled it like a true gentleman, even when he was attacked." These expressions of support not only bolstered Marcus's resolve, but also ignited a spark among community members who were determined to stand up against discrimination. By the end of the conflict build-up, the Copper Mule had become the epicenter of a growing movement. Every shared video clip, every heated conversation among patrons, and every whispered comment among the staff underscored the reality that TJ's actions were not just a personal failing, but a symptom of a larger societal issue. The public was united in its demand for accountability, and the stage was set for a dramatic escalation that would force TJ to confront the consequences of his prejudice, a moment when karma would, in all its relentless power, come knocking. In the days following the incident, the story of the racist outburst at the Copper Mule spread far beyond the walls of the bar. Social media platforms exploded with outrage as video after video of the incident was shared by hundreds of thousands of people. Hashtags such as hashtag Justice for Marcus and hashtag No More Racist Bartenders trended nationally, capturing the attention of local news outlets and igniting a fierce debate about discrimination in public service. The owner of the Copper Mule, Linda Garcia, found herself at the center of the controversy. Determined to protect her establishment's reputation and to uphold the values of inclusivity that she had worked so hard to build, Linda quickly announced that an internal investigation would be launched. She vowed to take swift action, promising that those responsible for any form of discrimination would be held accountable. Her announcement was broadcast on local television and received with mixed reactions. While many praised her commitment to fairness, others wondered if the damage had already been done. Within the bar, internal dissent began to simmer. Several employees, emboldened by the public outcry, spoke up about past incidents where they had witnessed TJ's discriminatory behavior. In a series of confidential interviews, they recounted times when customers had been mocked or treated rudely solely because of their race. The collective voice of the staff grew louder, and soon, internal emails and memos detailing previous complaints against TJ were leaked to the press. These documents painted a damning picture of a long-standing culture of bias that had been allowed to fester unchecked. Meanwhile, local civil rights groups and community leaders organized peaceful protests outside the Copper Mule and in front of City Hall. Crowds gathered with signs reading, "Every customer matters" and "No room for racism," their chants echoing in the cool evening air. The protests were well organized and drew attention from both local and national media. In one televised interview, a prominent activist declared, "This incident is not an isolated case. It is a reflection of a system that tolerates discrimination. We will not stand idly by until every act of injustice is exposed." The public pressure mounted relentlessly. As more evidence emerged from the internal investigation, the story took on a life of its own. A detailed report compiled by the investigative journalist, which included interviews, digital logs, and security footage, was published online, quickly amassing thousands of shares and sparking heated discussions in online forums. The once dismissed act of racist aggression had now become a symbol of the broader struggle against prejudice, and every new revelation added urgency to the call for accountability. Within the Copper Mule, the atmosphere was charged with tension. Employees huddled in break rooms, discussing the unfolding scandal, and many expressed hope that this incident would finally lead to meaningful change. "We have been silent for too long," one bartender confided. "Today, our voices are being heard." The internal culture began to shift, as those who had once feared retribution found the courage to speak out. Amidst this growing storm, Linda Garcia held an emergency press conference at the bar. Standing in front of the backdrop of her establishment's signature decor, she addressed the media with a firm resolve. "We at the Copper Mule believe that every customer deserves respect," she stated. "Our investigation has revealed a pattern of behavior that does not align with our values. We are taking immediate steps to ensure that this never happens again." Her words were met with a mixture of applause and skeptical glances as the community waited to see if her promises would translate into real change. In parallel, internal affairs at the parent company of the Copper Mule intensified their scrutiny of TJ's conduct. Digital records from the bar's surveillance cameras were meticulously reviewed, and eyewitness accounts were compiled into a comprehensive dossier. The evidence was undeniable. TJ's actions were not a one-off lapse in judgment, but part of a disturbing trend of discriminatory behavior. The internal pressure was now so great that even some senior executives who had previously defended TJ began to distance themselves from his conduct. As the week progressed, the combined forces of public protest, internal accountability, and relentless media coverage reached a fever pitch. The once relatively quiet chatter in the bar had given way to an all-consuming demand for justice. Every new piece of evidence that surfaced only further confirmed that the racist incident was symptomatic of a deep-rooted problem that could no longer be ignored. The stage was set for a dramatic turning point, a moment when the full weight of accountability would be delivered, and the person responsible would finally face the consequences. The turning point arrived on a crisp afternoon in a packed conference room at the headquarters of the Copper Mule's parent company. Senior executives, legal advisors, community leaders, and members of the media gathered in solemn anticipation to hear the final verdict of the internal investigation. With an air of calm determination, Senior Manager Carla Ortiz took the podium. After an exhaustive review of all digital records, surveillance footage, and eyewitness testimonies, "We have reached a conclusion," Carla began, her voice resonating with authority. "It is clear that flight attendant Karen Matthews' actions were driven solely by personal bias and are completely unacceptable. Her refusal to serve Mr. Darius Lewis was a blatant act of discrimination that undermines everything we stand for." A hush fell over the room as her words sank in. Carla continued, "Effective immediately, Karen Matthews is suspended from duty pending a full disciplinary review. This decision is not merely a disciplinary action. It is a declaration that discrimination, in any form, will not be tolerated in our organization." At that moment, Darius Lewis, the man who had endured the indignity of being mocked and physically disrespected, stood up. His expression was calm, yet there was an undeniable strength in his eyes as he addressed the assembly. "I have always believed that respect is a basic human right," he said softly, his voice clear and unwavering. "Today, I stand not as a victim, but as a voice for every person who has ever been subjected to unfair treatment. Let this moment mark the beginning of a future where accountability is the norm, and where every individual is treated with the dignity they deserve." The room erupted in applause, a powerful outpouring of collective relief and determination. Inspector David Ramirez then stepped forward, presenting a meticulously compiled dossier of evidence that included internal memos, security camera footage, and witness statements. Each piece of evidence reinforced the undeniable truth. Karen Matthews' behavior was not an isolated incident, but part of a persistent pattern of discriminatory actions. The turning point was sealed with a unanimous vote from the Internal Affairs panel. The decision to suspend Karen Matthews sent shockwaves not only through the organization, but also throughout the community, as the public watched with bated breath. For many, this was a long overdue moment of justice, a moment that affirmed the belief that no one, regardless of their position, was above accountability. In that critical moment, the balance of power shifted dramatically. The institution that had long turned a blind eye to prejudice now stood on the threshold of transformative change. The shock on Karen Matthews' face, captured by every camera in the room, became a lasting symbol of the day when the truth finally prevailed. It was a decisive blow to a culture of discrimination and a bold promise that moving forward, every act of injustice would be met with swift and unyielding consequences. In the wake of the landmark decision, the Copper Mule and its parent company embarked on a journey toward lasting reform. News of Karen Matthews' suspension and the comprehensive internal investigation spread quickly throughout the community, sparking passionate discussions about accountability, equality, and the urgent need to eradicate discrimination in public service. Local media hailed the verdict as a watershed moment, and social media buzzed with support for Darius Lewis and calls for systemic change. Darius, whose dignity had been tested that fateful day, emerged as a symbol of quiet strength and resilience. In the days that followed, he participated in community forums and spoke out at local events, urging people to stand together and demand fair treatment for all. His calm, measured words resonated deeply with those who had long suffered from bias, and his experience became a rallying cry for further reform. Meanwhile, Senior Manager Carlo Ortiz and Lieutenant Marcus Daniels led a series of sweeping changes within the organization. New training programs on cultural sensitivity, ethical conduct, and unbiased customer service were rolled out across all branches. Policies were revised, and oversight mechanisms were strengthened to ensure that every complaint of discriminatory behavior would be investigated promptly and transparently. The company's commitment to fairness was no longer just lip service. It was now woven into the fabric of its daily operations. The internal investigation into Karen Matthews' behavior sparked a broader movement within the service industry. Other businesses began to review their own practices, and the story became a catalyst for a national conversation about the need for accountability in customer-facing roles. The incident, once confined to a single bar, had grown into a powerful symbol of the fight against racism in all its forms. Public sentiment was equally strong. Town hall meetings and public demonstrations took place, where community members, civil rights advocates, and local politicians gathered to demand that discriminatory practices be eradicated. Banners with messages such as "Every customer matters" and "No room for racism" filled the streets, and local leaders vowed to remain vigilant in their pursuit of justice. The collective energy was palpable, a community united in its determination to build a future where respect and equality were paramount. One final public gathering was held in the plaza outside City Hall. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the assembled crowd, Lieutenant Marcus Daniels took the stage. "Today, we have taken a definitive stand against discrimination," he declared, his voice imbued with hope and resolve. "Let this moment remind us that every act of injustice will be met with accountability, and that together we can build a community where every individual is valued and respected." His words were met with resounding applause, and the atmosphere was one of cautious optimism. As Central City slowly returned to its routine, the legacy of that fateful day endured. The incident had sparked a movement for change that reached far beyond the Copper Mule. It had ignited a call for systemic reform in how service and respect were delivered. Darius Lewis's quiet courage and the decisive actions of those who demanded accountability serve as a powerful reminder that when injustice is confronted head-on, real transformation is possible. The story of that day became a lasting beacon, a testament to the idea that no one, regardless of their power or position, is above the law. The lessons learned paved the way for a future where every individual, from customers to employees, could enjoy an environment free from discrimination. Central City emerged stronger and more united, with a renewed commitment to ensuring that respect, equality, and justice were at the heart of every interaction.